We're live.
Okay. All right. Hello,
You
everybody.
are now.
That's right. So I think I heard this today from Justin. He said if you're streaming from a platform and you're streaming to another platform, probably YouTube and Twitch, from a platform from Zoom or Skype, he said the view time is probably like 4 or 5 seconds lower. So if you haven't done this thing, I advise you don't just not look at yourself on YouTube right now because you're gonna have conflicts of time too. All right. So hi everybody. My name is Sauta. My name is not people can hear me right now. My name is Sauta. I'm actually a functional developer. I get something from my own this career. And I have amazing folks here with me. Hi, Thought. You're the
Hey.
first person on my screen. Yeah, right. So, Thought is the okay. Thought is the chief in Apollo Graph here. In Nigeria, yeah, chief is like the boss. We call chief the boss.
Oh,
All right.
snap. All right.
I know that.
Hey.
My Amazon boss. I
Hello.
that's my mom. So I want to be fair for the relationship. Oh, it's my last. Hi,
Hi.
Say your madam is happy. I think so. Let's just take 2 minutes and give you a brief introduction about ourselves. So you are first on my screen here for I'll choose you first.
Yeah, sure. Little quick introduction. I am a developer advocate at Apollo GraphQL. I've been in the tech industry coming up on about 8 years now. Wow, maybe almost 10. Yeah, and really focused on a lot of stuff like web, mobile, GraphQL, some serverless stuff.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I heard of serverless. I heard serverless a lot, and I think I've not done anything that relates to serverless, but I think serverless is like saying front end that actually manages your data without using any backend shit, right? That's probably what the first serverless. Oh, we'll talk about
Yeah,
serverless later. Hi, Nada.
yeah.
You
Hey,
have
what's
some?
up? Yeah, my name is Nader. I am a developer and I live in Mississippi. I'm from here and I still live here. I left here and lived in LA for about a year to get into software, and then I'm back and I work remotely. I'm a consultant. I've worked at startups. I've worked at big companies, and right now I work at Amazon Web Services as a developer advocate on the mobile team.
I thank you very much for sharing that. Hi, Mom. You go next.
Hey, everybody. I'm Angie Jones. I'm an Java developer specializing in test automation. I'm a senior developer advocate at Apply Tools. Um, that's it.
Wow.
All right,
Short
Karen.
and sweet. All right, I'm Cher, obviously, not the singer, just the dev. I started some product code more than 20 years ago, and I've been in the industry for just about 15 years, also learning everything I know essentially on the job. High school dropout, college dropout, and now working at Apple as a staff software engineer.
Hey.
Hey, after 1 year, I'm gonna go to after two.
I didn't say how long I've been in the industry. A very long time. Maybe.
You sold yourself a little short in your intro because I kind of know a little bit about you, and
Yeah.
you could have probably gone on for about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, I've been doing this about, I think, 17 years now.
Wow, that's just 7 years from when Java started.
I know. I was like one of the newer Java devs.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. All right, so I did say the other time that I have a schedule, but I'm not gonna be using it. But then this is like a brief introduction. So now let's now go into the main in-depth career introduction. So before I actually start asking the main career question, the challenges, the problems, the stepping stone, the mentorship. So let's not talk about the career phase itself. Probably, I'm sure if it's typing will actually be easier. But then when you are talking, you probably skip something, so it's not a big deal. It's okay. So he doesn't have to correct what he typed before. So just give us like a brief intro on how the process started. All right. So who's going first? Okay, Pot is here. Pot is going first.
All right. Yeah, no pressure. So my career in tech started in, well, I guess about like 10 to 12 years ago. I'm not very good with math. Become a developer. Yeah, but I actually was introduced to code when I was incarcerated in North Carolina. I was doing about a 7-year sentence, and I was taking like any program that was available to me, which was anything from like welding to electrical to whatever. And then I went to, I guess, camp that they were called there, but it was just a different prison. And they had classes around like IT, intro to computers. I took typing classes. Like I used to just like type like this before. I had no real background with computers other than downloading MP3s with like LimeWire or Napster. That was like the extent of my computer use. Yeah, and so I got my first intro to web development class there. I got my first taste of it, and I loved it. It immediately resonated with me. Before that, I had worked a lot of jobs with my hands, like construction and for general contractors and as a cook, so that immediate feedback of HTML and CSS was awesome. I love that like short feedback loop, being able to create something fast. So that's kind of where it took off. I was released a couple years later. I continued to do, I guess, what you could call self-guided learning, where I was learning everything online. I landed my first tech job almost 3 years after release, so 2012 close to 2013. From there, I was just at a local company. I was living in New York at the time. I shortly transitioned to jobs in New York City. So I got my first dev job in the city in like late 2013. This was at like a digital agency doing a lot of e-commerce stuff with Magento, WordPress, Drupal, stuff like that. From there, I went to one or two other little places. The next big place was a company called Integral Ad Science. And there is a big like analytics reporting and like real-time bidding, just like a lot of interesting stuff. And that's where I really started to, I guess you'd say, level up. I had a lot of good people around me, good mentors who taught me a lot of stuff, and I started to extend from the front end into the back end. I started learning about building APIs and ETL processes and fun stuff like that, dealing with bigger data sets and things, database management and administration, kind of working my way back to Stack. After that, again, a couple more small places, and then I landed at my next role, which I'd say helped me kind of define what I really like out of tech and enjoy, and that was at Major League Soccer. I got hired as a tech lead there about 2016 or 17. Yeah, that was a really rewarding job. I was responsible for building out a lot of the UI team there. Yeah, I really enjoyed that job. I was there for about 3 years. Ended up leaving because they didn't support remote, and I was decided to move to Virginia Beach, which is where I am now. And after MLS, I had a couple more jobs, just trying to figure out what was a good fit for me and what I was looking for. I was at Gatsby.js for a while. Then I was at Amazon with Natter, actually, and then I landed myself at GraphQL, and that catches us up to where we are today.
All right, thank you very much for that. Well, I'm not sure you work with Mother before. I've been trying to get myself to work with Mother. I actually volunteered to be in PA throughout this year. That's what we're calling the countries together, but the pandemic is here. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right, so, Andrew, you're up next.
All right. So, yeah, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life per se. I graduated from high school and said, okay, my parents basically said, you got to go to college. So I went to college, but I was really unsure of what I wanted to do. In order to apply, we had to like choose a major. So I didn't know what to choose. I just chose business because I figured it was broad enough that whatever I did decide to do, it'll work out. My father, he was an accountant, and he saw that tech was becoming an emerging space back then. So this was before like we were all walking around with cell phones and stuff like that. Like, people didn't have, this is when we had dial up and stuff, if you were lucky enough to have a computer. Go ahead.
I got a message now.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people are saying they can only hear Andrew's voice. They couldn't hear his thoughts. And they said the YouTube is blowing up. So I really just check that out, please. It's always to go to the chat for one, okay?
Are you saying that my mic is low? Is my mic?
Oh, they just can't hear you at all. I can only hear Angie clearly. Audio is low, and there's too much background now. Okay, so they're saying the audio is low. All right. Oh, let's see. Mm. Okay, all y'all engineers, give me some ideas. Um,
So if we're on streaming YouTube, are you just streaming the Zoom call straight through?
yeah, but I have headphones on, so maybe it's the audio is coming through you.
I'm gonna try and check it out now. I'm gonna mute my mic and so I can listen to it live here on my phone. Alright, so you guys talk.
Okay.
This is me talking.
Sultan, your voice is very low. Angie sounds great. um, turn up the volume. Turn up Zoom in the stream audio. Okay, hold
I
on.
tried turning up my mic. Did that help at all?
How do y'all hear Kurt?
How's it going now? I just cranked it all the way up.
Super low, barely can hear. All right, what if I do? Hold on, y'all.
Is my voice still low?
Select them speaker.
Using like OBS or something?
How is this? Okay, y'all talk.
Hey. Is that good?
Hello.
Mic check 1 2 1 2.
Say something else. Okay, somebody say yes. I don't know what they're saying. Okay, somebody said better now.
Okay.
Little better. Better.
Mike, let's get this right in my face.
Not as loud as me. Better. Kurt, they said Kurt's good now.
Okay.
Share, say something.
This is Sultan mic check. Now you hear me?
Sultan, they said take your mask off. Maybe they could hear you. Okay, people say it's good, and let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So let me finish my story. Okay, so yeah. So I went to college, like really unsure what I wanted to do. My father, he was an accountant. He saw tech was like the thing coming up. So he suggested that I take like a computer class, just something so that I know how to use a computer, because no matter what job I do, I'm going to need to at least, know how to use it. So silly me being like totally oblivious. Like I'm telling you, I didn't know like programming was a thing. I didn't know anybody who was a programmer. Like it just was not on my radar. So silly me looking for a computer course, I look and see like the C++ course, and I'm like, all right, let's take this. So I jump into a C++ course, and I actually loved it. Right. So that was surprising, and I kind of found out what I wanted to do, and I did well in it, and my professors suggested I change my major, which I did. And so that's my story. I graduated with a computer science degree. I went to work for IBM. In college, I did a bunch of internships as well, like maybe 3. I think 2 with Boeing and then 1 with IBM. And then I went on to IBM. I was at IBM for a very long time, about 9 years. Did a lot of cool stuff there as well. Became an inventor and was patenting things. That was a interesting journey though, because like I said, I didn't know anything about the tech field, so I didn't know like, oh, there's not a lot of women here, or black people make up like 2% of tech jobs. Like I didn't know any of that, which is kind of good because that way I wouldn't feel intimidated while I was in school. I went to an HBCU, which is a historically black college. And so everybody was kind of like in the same boat as me, like first generation college students. Nobody knows coding. Nobody's been coding since they were 5. Like we were all 18, So I went into the workforce, IBM nonetheless. And it was like kind of a culture shock for me, being like the only person. Like I grew up in black neighborhoods and all of my schooling has been pretty much predominantly black. And so this was like really interesting for me to be in such a space. And so I was kind of withdrawn like the first couple of years. Like I did my job. That was fine. I could write the code, but that social interaction part was really weird for me. So like I don't know, I wouldn't come in and ask like, how is your weekend or whatever. And I wouldn't speak up in meetings because the ideas that I had were just so different from what they were talking about. And so I would think, well, my idea must be stupid and surely they've already thought of this. So I would just kind of be quiet. And I got a bad review one year. And it wasn't about my work. The review is basically like, you don't speak up in meetings, you're not really showing initiative, your colleagues think you don't like them, those kind of like microaggression types of things. But hey, I realized like that's the game, and if I want to play it, then I need to change it up. So I said, all right, well, I'll go ahead and start speaking in these meetings, even if my ideas are dumb, whatever. Otherwise, I'm going to get a bad review. So when I started speaking up in those meetings, it was interesting. My coworkers would, instead of saying like, oh, that's a dumb idea, would be like, wow, that's like pretty brilliant, like, oh, that's really creative or that's really innovative. And it was just like a different perspective. And I don't think that's because like I'm so smart or whatever. I think it's a lot of my background and upbringing is just so different from the people that I work with most of the time. So my perspective might be, a little bit different or whatever. But it was pretty cool to have those moments and even go on to patent some of those ideas. So I took that as a lesson, like, even though statistically I might not belong in tech, but I bring so much to the table just by being different. And that went from being my crutch to being like my superpower.
All right, thank you very much. That was totally understood. So even at the end of this first introduction, I think I'm already gathering some facts about how you guys got into tech, and I'm going to say a little bit something about that. All right, Chair, you're up next. All right.
All right. Yeah. So I grew up kind of poor. Talked about that a bit. But my mom worked for construction companies, and she happened to stumble into kind of like computers. She's pretty smart, so she would bring home the like used parts back home, and so we were able to build a couple of PCs. And I started playing online video games. And so just kind of like got into that and didn't really have a lot of friends at school. So started just like, and I've always just been the kind of person, like the way that I work is kind of that, like I like taking stuff apart and seeing how it works, putting it back together. Kind of just went that way with web because I needed a website. So I was like, oh, there's got to be a way to make this. And so the first programming language I learned was HTML through reverse engineering a website. And that kind of went on to CSS and then JavaScript and ActionScript. And then I used like that skill throughout high school while I was still in, and just to do like various projects and stuff. And I was always like making stuff that was like, way better than everybody else's, which was really helpful since I skipped school a lot and didn't do any homework really. But to kind of get by, ended up dropping out because I was being bullied really bad. Which not in, I guess, a traditional sense, like being a woman, like who I started development like really early and started getting a lot of like sexual objectification. Like when I was 11 years old, like my dad's friends would say like, that's not a little girl, that's a woman, and just so a lot of like constant commenting about my appearance and the way that I look. And, even, my mom, who apologizes for this now, like, she, like I would want to wear the same stuff that other girls were wearing, like spaghetti strap tank tops, bikinis, like all of this stuff. And she, one of her friends bought me this swimsuit one summer that was just gorgeous, like mermaid, sparkly kind of fabric. And my mom said that I looked like a stripper, and that was something that people said to me in school, that I was going to grow up and be a stripper. That's what I looked like. And so I just got to the point where it was like there was no safe place for me and not even, video games on the internet were enough to escape from reality. Like I started using drugs, trading my body to continue to use to escape. Ended up going to Arizona, where some of my friends were going to ASU, and I really just wanted to start over. I'm like, this cannot be my life. Like I don't want this for my life. And so I actually enrolled myself in high school there. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna finish. Like I was gonna have to do a lot more credits because when you change states, the requirements are different because they all have state specific requirements. And so I tried to do that, and I was just really good at math. And right away, this boy in my calculus class, he was like, wow, you're really smart. I'm really struggling in this class. He's like, can you come over and tutor me? And I was like, really lonely and really needed friends. I was the same person, just in another place. So I was like, yeah, totally. And, he was a popular kid or whatever. So I was down for it. And I got to his house and, he had drugs and he's like, hey, you want to smoke? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I guess, And then just like that, he was on top of me. And I was like, oh, that's why he wanted me to come over. And it was just it clicked right then. And I was like, this is what I'm here for. There's nothing that I'm going to be able to ever do that is going to make me not be forced the sex for a man. That's just what I thought. And so I started so I was there for a while. I actually had a really, really traumatic sexual assault happen there, and I ended up leaving there and trying to go back to my mom's again. But it was just more of the same. I was just in so deep and so lonely and lost. And I was working restaurant jobs and stuff, but I was getting hooked up with guys who were, in the drug game and, doing armed robbery and stuff. And so they would always find a way to basically ruin my job by getting access and, coming in and stealing stuff. And, I just couldn't stay anywhere. So, I ended up deciding that if I was going to escape, I was going to have to, just leave, just get the heck out. And so I had a friend online, who lived where I live now in the St. Louis area, who said that he had his friends were from Nigeria, and they had just bought a house in Glen Carbon, Illinois, which is this very tiny little town to go to. Southern Illinois University of Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, and so I had $120, bought a one-way red eye, which back then was $29 or something on Southwest. It's totally empty. And came out here, and I was like, okay, for sure, I had no, okay, I'm going to try to go back to high school. I'm going to get my GED. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to figure something out. I'm going to go to college. And so I got here, and I got my room all set up. Everything was really great. And that same guy, that same night, he came into my room and just took what he wanted, and I was like, okay, well, I tried again, third strike, I'm not, this is what my life is. So I got into stripping at that point. And then I was on MySpace. So I was working at this club called Hustler, and they had a really big MySpace presence at the time. And so I was on their MySpace page, and one of this producer, or he said he was a producer, contacted me and was like, oh my God, you're so gorgeous. You're so unique looking, blah, 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 blah. Your body is so amazing. He's like, I would love to talk to you about doing pornography. And I mean, at this point, I was just well, I'd already done some cam stuff. I'm doing stripping. Why not? Just go the full mile. I'll just go ahead and do that. So I agreed to go out there to talk to them. And they flew me out to New York. And I went to their studio. And of course, what ended up happening was that they were trying to get me into sex trafficking. So they had me create a fake identity, a bunch of fake emails. And I was 19 years old. So I didn't really understand what was happening. I kind of just thought that was a part of it. And I've struggled so much with even in normal stuff, just being able to say no and deal with conflict, because I never learned those skills. And so, when they're continuing to keep going down this rabbit hole, and I'm just getting really confused, but I don't really know what to do. And then the guy he just started getting undressed and started taking off my clothes, and I was just sitting there, and I was just I don't know how to stop this. And I was just I'm not ready for this. And they just kept saying, yeah, you are. You're so ready. You're so ready. And so I just laid there and let them do whatever they wanted to do while I was sitting there sobbing. And there was a lot of them there, and I ended up getting just so. There was one point, and it was so traumatic that I started bawling so hard that they told me to go to the bathroom and collect myself, and that's when I got out. and left and got a taxi, got back to the airport and left. After I got back here from that experience, I tried like connecting with some of my local friends, and everything I did just felt so empty. And so I just was like, I don't want to live like this. Like that, if that's what I'm here for, like I can't function being that person. And so I decided to try to take my own life via poisoning. My roommate found me, called 911, and I stayed in a mental institution for 6 weeks. Got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, among some other things, and like PTSD, and tried for a year to move on from that. Didn't really get anywhere. Got back into stripping a little bit, and then I met my daughter's dad. Got pregnant, obviously, and then at that point, I was like, I have to do something so that my daughter doesn't grow up the way that I grew up. Like, I have to do something different. I can't use drugs. I can't drink. I can't do anything. Like, all that matters now is like taking care of this kid. And so it wasn't like a super like linear path of like where I was like suddenly like, oh, okay, like I'm pregnant now, everything's good. Like I was back and forth between my ex and my mom's house, which she lives in Washington, he lives here. So it was like driving back and forth across the country when I was pregnant by myself, moving, no job, no prospects. And then at some point, I was like 7 months pregnant, he kicked me out. And I guess it was like probably just like nesting instincts. I was just like, I have to get a job. And the only skill I had was that I could write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and ActionScript. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to get this job. Like, I applied for a bunch of ones, and one of them, they called me down for an interview. And I was like terrified because there was like whiteboarding, and like he was like asking me to like break down like a PDF into like how I would write it in HTML. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is like so like enormous that I like don't know what I've gotten myself into. But I just somehow like I just was like, okay, I'm gonna do the best I can. So I started talking about lists and like how like just different HTML elements and like how I do with CSS. I had done CSS and Garden, so I think that was like helpful for me to like say that like, okay, well yeah, you can do this like this and then use CSS to make it look this way, but like it'll still make semantic sense. Just having those small like bits of information that I had to like get that job, and I ended up getting it, and that wasn't like, even though that was the beginning of my tech career, it wasn't really like the hard start beginning because they were not paying me enough to pay for childcare and my rent living in Seattle. So I ended up having to quit because they wouldn't give me a raise. And while I was on the job, I had learned Ruby on Rails because that was the platform that everybody was writing back in 2006. So I learned that there, and then I also picked up this book called Rails Space, which was a book about how to write social network on Ruby on Rails. And so I wrote this repository called Cipher Vault, which was for cipher fonts that you could download to use on your website back before we had font importing in CSS. And that got actually a ton of attention. Like I got multiple articles written about it in Smashing Magazine. And so that kind of got my name out there. And I started writing like Ruby on Rails plugins for Cipher and other like font replacement stuff back then. And so I kind of built like a tiny little name for myself. But then unfortunately, like I had clients, but they had stopped paying, and I was working like restaurant jobs at the same time. And it just became like way too much to manage. And plus I was trying to go to school, which, dropped out several times. And now I'm saddled with a ton of student loan debt thanks to that. And so really it wasn't until, again, like so my daughter's dad moved around a lot, and I was kind of like following him where he went so that like my daughter would have her dad, which is a whole other, thing. But for a month, I was in Austin, Texas, and he was back here in St. Louis again. And I just like fell back into using drugs because I like had this like, it was just like overwhelming of like, how am I supposed to like move again? I have no money, like no job. My clients that are my web development stuff aren't paying me. And so I just started using drugs. I got into worse drugs because I started sleeping with another drug dealer, and he was using way harder stuff. And then just one day I just was like, I need to go be a mom, And so I packed up my stuff and drove here, and with finding a place to live and like everything, and just kind of figured it out. And about 11 months after that, things hadn't really gotten better. I wasn't using drugs anymore, but just like, yeah. So got the job at USA Today, and that pretty much turned everything around for me. starting from 2011. Is
that's really good. That's really good. That's really good. Yeah, as in, a lot of folks have not even gone through half of this, and I'm sure a lot of people tweeted already. Actually, you're really amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure there's still quite a lot to share. So I'll be moving on to Nada now. We have just, let's say, 27 minutes more. So Nada, please could you just give us 5 minutes, a little bit introduction about that part, the career stuff part, man.
I think it's interesting to hear Sharon Kurt's story out of like a similar experience that I've had. I've wondered, with the drug use and having setbacks and stuff. Mine weren't actually as nearly as severe, I would say, as what Kurt and what Cher went through. But I feel like sometimes when you go through that stuff, it kind of, once you kind of see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, you become extremely motivated to excel and do what you can so you don't go back into those situations. And if you haven't experienced those situations, it's hard to understand kind of like, what that looks like. But I'll try to be brief. Grew up here in Mississippi. My dad is an immigrant from Palestine. My mom is a blonde American from Mississippi, and lived here pretty much my whole life. I was 17 at the time when I dropped out of high school. I think I mentioned some of my story in that tweet. I dropped out of high school because I felt like I didn't fit in. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had really, really good days and good months and good years, and really bad days, bad months, bad years. So we would be like on the verge of bankruptcy one year, and the next year maybe we're doing really well. So we had ups and downs, but during my growing up, we were never poor. Like we were able to eat, and we had lived in a decent neighborhood where we had a house. We weren't like moving around. I would say like we went on vacations, most years and stuff like that. But my parents always valued education for me. So they put me in a very good high school, which was ironic because I dropped out in my senior year after they spent all this money for me to go to this really great school. I felt like I did get a good education there, but I never felt that I fit in. In Mississippi, there's still basically what you see kind of like segregation, where there's private schools, which are the white schools, and then there's public schools, which are quote-unquote black schools. I was at one of these private schools, and out of 120 people that went to this school, there were, in my grade, there were no black people. There was only 2 or 3 people that weren't just white. So there was a couple of Indian people and a couple of people like me that were mixed that people may or may not have known. But there's like a culture in a lot of these private schools where your dad goes to Ole Miss or this college or with that college. They went to this fraternity. They are in these cliques, and if you're not in one of those cliques, if you're any way different, you're going to be an outcast. So people certain people can deal with that. I wasn't able to deal with it really well, so I started turning into drugs and alcohol in my early teens, trying to fit in, because the people that were using drugs would basically, as long as you brought drugs, you could fit in, you could hang out with them. And I think that kind of made me, not really care about school, and ultimately just dropped out because of a bunch of stuff. Tried to go back to college, but ultimately, like, I was really big into drugs and alcohol, honestly, from the age of like 15 to 29, maybe. I did a bunch of stuff during those years. I had good years and bad years. I would get a job doing like real estate. I was never successful at anything. I would always be able to fall back and work for my dad in his family business. So that's kind of what I would do. Like, I would try something, I would fail at it, and then I could always go and work hourly for my dad. So at the age of like 29, I was working for my dad. He has a clothing business, and we decided we wanted to sell online. Actually, I decided I was like, we need to be online. We need an e-commerce store. We tried to hire people to do it. It didn't work out. I said, fuck it, let me try to write this code myself and make it happen. And that's how I learned how to code. I started writing PHP. I built a WordPress site. This WordPress site did really well. After about 9 months, we were making more in sales than we were in the actual store. I realized it was something I wanted to do. I was able to basically help sell the business and then have enough money set aside to where I could like not work for a year or two and explore what I wanted to do for the first time in my life. I knew I wanted to program. Then basically had a couple of months after that. I was actually using drugs during that time, and that's actually how I learned how to program. I was taking amphetamine. I was taking Adderall. I was taking cocaine actually here and there because like when you're programming and like you're taking the stuff, you're staying up all night, you're just like killing it. That's actually how I learned how to program to an extent. After all this happened, I actually went into rehab for a couple of months, and during that time in rehab, I basically had like.
Okay, did Nada just freeze?
Yeah.
Yeah, he froze.
Oh shit.
He was right at the good part, right at the juicy part.
I'm sorry, did I break up a little bit?
You froze on us.
Froze.
Yeah, anyway, so like basically, like while in
Oh shit, again. You're running 200 megabytes per second, man. There.
Did it break up again?
It did. Every time you drop the result at the end.
I'm dying. I have 1 minute left.
Alright, man. Okay.
So basically, like during in rehab, I kind of had this awakening moment, became an atheist, which changed a lot of the way I thought, and it kind of like put this new motivation in me to do good in my life. Anyway, so I got online after I got out of rehab. I applied for hundreds of positions to be a developer. Started in Mississippi, then went to Atlanta and the surrounding areas. Never got any bites. Started applying to California. I had someone reply, say, "Hey, you can start on Monday." I lived in Mississippi. This was a Friday. I said, "I'll take it." I actually bought a plane ticket and I flew to LA. And then my wife and my kids met me there 2 or 3 months later. I lived there for about a year. And then from there, I've been kind of building my career up. Started attending meetups. I actually started a meetup in Mississippi, funded with my own money. Started a coding boot camp here for free for a couple of years. Had to stop doing that when I started traveling. Became a consultant. Landed some big clients, made a lot of money around that time, and then now I work for Amazon. And I got the foot in the door for Amazon during the time as a consultant.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, so majorly what I've been able to put together is that a lot of the questions, I did show you guys the questions, right, the other time. So a lot of the questions are like, how did you get your first job? How did you get your first job? How did you even pick programming? And I think the answer would be, in some cases, it's due to what you have around you, like Hanji. And Kurt said he was just trying to take any program that would help his career, that would help his life. So if it was fashion designing that was available then for Kurt would probably be working in, let's say, Gucci and Gabbana right now. You understand?
Yeah.
All right, so
I don't think you want me to be a designer, but I should give it a shot.
All right, so it's majorly picking your tech field as a beginner is majorly based on the circumstances around you. I did write an article about that. All right, so right now I want to pair Angie and Che together, and what we're just going to do is just going to be like 2 minutes or 3 minutes talk. Now you are female in tech, and Angie that's a black in tech also. Now this is majorly on your career base right now. What issues did you face when it comes to leveling up, like progressing in your particular field, and probably even getting the job as a beginner also? What are the roadblocks you actually faced? All right.
Do you want to start, Angie?
Sure. So I hate this, and I hate to even say it because I don't like to encourage people to do this sort of thing, but it's really hard to level up in like a company, right? It's only like so far you can go, especially like people like us. And so anytime I've made like a great advancement, it's been because I've left the company and I've went somewhere else. And I hate that our industry is like that. I'm one of those people, like, I'm very loyal and faithful, and I would love to stay somewhere like forever, which is why I like stayed at IBM for 9 years until the point where I was just like so miserable that I could barely walk through the door every day. And that's when I realized I had to leave. But every like big advancement, I've had a couple of promotions and stuff, but every like big advancement has been from me leaving and going somewhere else. Fortunately, I'm at a company now that treats me like royalty. They're very, very, very good to me. And, now I'm seeing things like, the respectable raises and stuff like that. But that took like a very long time, and it took me like, gaining a following externally from my job, right? So I started leveraging it. I've only been like speaking and kind of working in public for about 3 years now. And that's really when my career started to change, and opportunities started to present themselves with less of a hurdle to jump over to get into those opportunities. So sometimes you have to like, we all start off like just trying to get everyone to respect us and acknowledge how dope we are internally. And I found that leveling up externally and then feeding that back in, like, y'all don't know who I am, I'm dope, you better ask Twitter. Like, that helps a lot. Go ahead, share.
Yeah, that's definitely like very similar. Like all of the big moves I've made have been by leaving a company, which is, I mean, it's kind of sad, to like feel like you're not getting recognized in your org. The only promotion I've ever gotten in an org was when I was at USA Today, and it was actually because there was a reorganization, so my title no longer existed, and they had to give me a new one. So they just like, oh, you've been here for a while, I guess you're a senior. But like as soon as I moved to a different company, I was back down to being a mid. And I really think like not having female leadership in the places that I had worked previously, like definitely like played a role in, like, because I was at USA Today for almost 4 years, and that was the longest job I had ever had anywhere at one place. And so I would get like annual reviews and stuff, and there was always stuff that I now recognize as like microaggressions towards women, like saying that like I actually spoke up a lot, but like in a very like passionate way. And a lot of the men did as well, but none of them were getting called like aggressive or, kind of those words of like, oh, she's too loud. She, tries to make people notice her too much. She's really desperate for attention. And I'm just like, I have really good ideas and I care about our users. Like, and I don't want to like, I'm sorry, I don't want to put my name on stuff that I don't feel proud of, like to millions and millions of people, so very, very similar kind of thing where, I mean, yeah, it's just like you have to fight to be seen in your space, even though you're like oftentimes the only woman, in the room, and still you're like fighting to be seen. You should be very noticeable. Like it should be a sign, like the only one with breasts in here. Like that shouldn't have to be so loud for you to hear me. But that's definitely how it is. And I also hate to say, like, if you're not moving up, like you move to a different company. If you're not getting the compensation that you deserve, like move to another company, because there is somebody out there who's going to give you that, and then maybe you can go back to that dream company or whatever, with a new salary. And when I was at Blizzard, a lot of people did that. They would leave, go get a raise, and then come back and get, and that's the only way they could get a raise.
Thank you very much. I think you both have a similar experience in that field, and I think a lot of people have been actually fighting for equal rights and more. I've seen this thread before. I think it was Angie who said something about if you want to actually get noticed in your job, you should speak up more. But even though when you speak up more, a lot of people try and bring you down and say you're trying to get yourself noticed, which is kind of really, really hard. All right, so let me switch to Kurt and Nada now. All right, so the same question goes for you guys. How exactly were you able to level up? Whether did you face the same issues the ladies face, and also did you actually have to move out of your company to actually level when it comes to salary raise or position raise? How did you go about that?
I'll let Craig go first.
So no, I did not face the same issues. Whenever I spoke up about anything, I was passionate about something. I was never treated as aggressive. That's for sure. Women definitely face, and anyone from marginalized groups faces a way harder struggle. As a matter of fact, I attribute a lot of my success in my career to privilege. I'm someone who came out of prison. I was incarcerated, for almost 7 years, and luckily I worked my way through jobs because I'd be lucky that people didn't do background checks, whether the company just didn't do them or they just didn't do one because I'm a middle-aged white guy. I don't don't know. When I would interview, oftentimes, like someone actually just tweeted and asked, like, have you ever had a conversational interview turn into a technical interview? I haven't. I've actually had the opposite, where it's supposed to be a technical interview, but there's someone sitting across from the table who looks pretty much just like me. And it turns into a conversation about stuff, and I know enough keywords and buzzwords and phrases to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, a lot of my advancements, I attribute to that. I definitely worked hard, and I did face some stumbling blocks, but I also like to preface that my stumbling blocks were self-inflicted. I did definitely struggle with drug addiction and the crimes I committed. I did during a Xanax blackout, but I was the one who was, still using and got myself in that position. My biggest stumbling block would just be my background. It's extremely difficult for anyone with any sort of criminal background to get work anywhere. Luckily, I just happened to find that the tech field was actually more lenient than most places. When I first got out, I would try and work jobs at like TJ Maxx or McDonald's or anywhere, and they would do background checks, and they would not hire me. So I would have to check no, work there for a couple of weeks until I got fired, and I would just constantly apply at new places, even when I had a job, because I knew that they would do a background check and I'd get fired. So when I broke into tech, things actually got easier for me. I will say that it was pretty similar, where I did not get a lot of internal raises and bumps up. I would sometimes get promotions and be given more responsibility, but rarely did money accompany that. So I would do lateral moves, right? I would move to other companies. That changed when I was at MLS. That was the one place they actually gave me very reasonable raises, and they had a path laid out for individual contributors and people who didn't want to necessarily be like a manager. But once I decided to move to Virginia Beach, that was no longer an option. But luckily for me now, I'm at the point in my career where I'm working at these big companies. It's like other people have mentioned, I've kind of built a presence for myself online, and so I lean on that network and stuff like that to help me. But yeah, I would say that was my biggest stumbling block. Like, as a middle-aged white dude, you really don't hit a lot of stumbling blocks because everyone else looks just like you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nada.
I think Nada froze.
Hey, yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
Nada. All right.
I can't really. Yeah, I agree with. I had the same exact experience as Kurt has had. I would say, as far as like the discussion around leveling up, I think for the advice that Angie gave goes for anyone. If you really want to get a massive pay increase, or you feel like you're ready, you've kind of learned a lot and you're ready for that next move, it's probably not going to happen in the company that you're in unless you're very fortunate. The best thing to do is to go out and find another job somewhere else, and that's how you kind of will take that next step usually. And that's been my experience as well.
Thank you very much for that, man. Okay, so I want to bring in some of the questions. When folks were filling the forms, they actually did drop a lot of questions. So one of the questions that actually caught my attention now is, okay, let me see. Okay. Yeah, somebody asked, and I think like 5 people asked that. Did you have a personal mentor while you started your career? Did you have a personal mentor for you, and not just you learning online? Did you have a personal mentor? Kurt, did you have a personal mentor?
So I did not. Before I was incarcerated, I knew nothing about computers. When I got out, I really didn't have anyone other than a couple of family members. I didn't know anyone. My first couple of jobs, not really. Most of my mentors were like online mentors. I was lucky enough to discover Twitter pretty early when I started getting into programming, and I would follow a lot of people. And I guess they were like my virtual mentors, just because I would just learn a lot of things by figuring out what they were talking about and liking, and then I would go Google it and look it up and learn about it. And so that was kind of how I did it. I've had mentors later on, but definitely not in the beginning. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just wandering around.
All right, thank you, Chair. When you started your coding career, did you have a personal mentor, like personal for you, maybe a friend that was there 247, or a senior developer that was there for you 247 in your career, Chair?
No, definitely not. I didn't have anybody like that. Really what drove me was just my daughter. The first real mentor I had was when I got to Blizzard, and not my direct manager, but his manager. That was my first mentor in tech, and she's been in for like 20 years. That was in like 2016, so like 4 years ago.
Okay, all right. So what about you, Nada?
Yeah, I'm very similar to Kurt. I never had a single mentor. I've had uncountable people along the way that have helped me out here and there in different jobs in the community. And really a lot of the things that I kind of have learned have been just finding very successful people and following them on social media and just reading their blogs and just learning from their experiences.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so another question I would want to bring out here. I want to bring out the question that's okay. Somebody asked, okay, first, let me make this clear. Now, a lot of the speakers have said that if you want to probably get a pay raise, if you want to level up, that what they did was most time they had to leave their company. They are not advising you to quit your job instantly. No, that's not what they are saying. You can always apply for a new role and while you're still currently working. You are allowed to apply for a new role. But they're not asking you to quit your job right now just because you want a pay raise. No, that's not how it works. So they're going to be clear about that when it comes and say, Angie asked me to quit my job. All right, so let's put that. My mark is coming out. All right, so okay, another question is, somebody asked, how did you handle imposter syndrome? I think 10 people asked something like that. How did you handle imposter syndrome? All right, so Angie Jones, would you want to say something about that? Just a minute.
Sure. I teach a whole workshop on this. But basically, I'll give you like some quick tips that I've used. I'm fortunate enough, like imposter syndrome knows not to come from me anymore. Like I beat the guy. And some of the things that I've used, saving like accolades, like when your boss or a team member, sometimes it's even more profound when it comes from a team member versus your boss, a peer just basically saying like, that was great. You helped me with this, or I learned this from you. Doesn't matter how big or small. Like I used to save those little kudos in like a file. Like if you told me something nice, you were going in my file. And anytime I would, doubt myself or imposter syndrome would try to attack me, then I would just read through that file because it didn't matter like what I said. If I told myself like, no, you are good, imposter syndrome would be like lies. But seeing it from other people, like all of these people can't possibly be lying to me, right? And we're logical thinkers. We're coders. So tap into that logical part of yourself and you read that stuff back and it's like, yeah, that person doesn't lie, or they wouldn't just throw out this compliment. So there must be some truth to that. So that's been very helpful. Another tip that I tell people is take a timer, give yourself like about 1 to 2 minutes and say, let me write down everything that I'm good at or whatever within that 60 seconds or that 2 minutes. And what that does is you're cheating imposter syndrome because you don't have time to second guess yourself because you're on a timer. So you just write it down, right? You say, I'm going to write 10 things. I'm going to write 20 things. Even if you don't get the 20, you've written 5 nice things about yourself and you kind of feel better after that.
That's really good. All right, so Hutz, you want to say something about that?
For me, it's slightly different. I definitely dealt with imposter syndrome a lot in the beginning, and I still do sometimes now. Like, I got extremely nervous just to do this panel. I was like, I don't really think I sit here.
You're an amazing developer and tons of
Thank you.
So how come you still do it imposter syndrome?
Yeah, thank you. And so it's different for everyone. Sometimes you can shake it early. It might not hit you much at all, and sometimes it sticks with you for a while. I've also just done a lot of things, much like what Angie said, just to kind of work and overcome that. It's like when I stop and think about it, I'm like, wow, okay, I have done a decent enough things. I've had a ton of people tell me, how much of a pleasure it was, to work with me and how much they've learned from me, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, it's just storing those away and being able to recall those and pull those up when those moments of imposter syndrome hit.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so I would be asking Nada and Chair this next question. Now, as a senior developer, as a principal engineer, what were the issues you faced while you were probably trying to mentor your junior developer? What were the issues you faced? So Nada, you're up.
Okay, so this is interesting because I don't think I've ever had the title principal, for sure not principal, and I don't know if I've ever had the title senior developer even. I think my last engineering position was just a developer before I went into consulting, and then now I'm a senior developer advocate, and I'm just now getting to that point. So I'd actually like to hear what share her experiences.
So I would say the biggest challenges I've had I really honestly think like being a woman and feeling like I'm being challenged in a way that like the way that my mentorship has been perceived by male colleagues that are more junior than me, especially if they're older than me, is that it's like a place of like, I don't know what the right, maybe like fear or something, intimidation, and that they don't necessarily understand that like I'm trying to help them grow. They're struggling to see past like the younger woman is advising them and giving them, technical direction or coaching, and kind of taking that as me like patronizing them or being condescending. And one of the problems I've faced personally is that I have a really hard time knowing what people are supposed to know. So like I grew up like extremely, extremely smart. And so one of the struggles that high IQ people have is that they don't know like what other people struggle with or what, like, is it like a baseline? And so sometimes when I'm mentoring people and I'm trying to understand what they're struggling with, again, that can come across as like being condescending. And really it's just because my baseline is that I assume that everybody else knows as much as I do. And as much as that can be from like my end, I don't mean anything bad by that. In fact, I mean something good by it. It can be perceived the other way as in they don't know enough. And I think that that's actually the biggest hurdles that I've had is just effective communication and just I'm a really good communicator in terms that I'm like very empathetic and I try really hard to I would say like mimic what the person I'm talking to is like feeling or going through. So just continuing to kind of like level up that skill of like understanding where the person that you're speaking to is coming from and having a really good understanding of like what they know, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. So that way, when you go into something, you're not, either going too far into the like, I'm over explaining things and now you feel like I think you're an idiot versus you feel like an idiot because I am expecting you to know way more than you do.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much. So actually, I would want to say we are now. This is 9 p.m. in Nigeria. So that's 1 hour right now. All right. So I would want to. A lot of people. We have about 92 people on live right now checking this out. That's just on YouTube alone, and we are streaming across Twitch and Twitter. So probably we have more than 100 people watching us right now, which this session will probably be recorded also. So for the record, this is not a technical panel session. It's more like an experience sharing panel session. And I'm really happy with the comments that I've been getting on YouTube. Amazing comments. All right, so if you have any question, you can tag these developers. You can tag, I will still tweet their handle. You can tag them and ask them tons of questions. Because right now, if I share my screen and you see the tons of questions that I've gotten, there is no way we can treat that right now. So this is just you getting to know that the famous developers that you know, they face tons of problems also. And it's not easy to get to this particular stage. So thank you very much, everybody. All right, so I think I promise that we won't exceed 9 o'clock. All right, so Chair, just one advice you want to give people that are looking for a job during this pandemic. So everybody just think about your advice you want to give them that are looking for a job during this pandemic, COVID-19 period. All right, Chair, what advice would you want to give developers looking for a job during this pandemic? What would you want to say? Like a cheat.
Just network as much as you can. Social media is the absolutely most incredible tool that we have ever built as engineers to connect each other. I sincerely did not know a single female developer before Twitter, and I had already been in the industry for almost a decade. So get to know people, follow them, build relationships, and then they can help connect you to jobs.
Okay, Angie, you're next on my screen here. So what cheat would you want to give devs that are looking for a job during this pandemic?
Yeah, definitely network. I'm going to say be kind to yourself. It is a rough time out here. It's not you. I know that getting constant rejections or not receiving phone calls or responses from your applications can be very disheartening. Be kind to yourself. Don't try your very best not to take that personally. It's just really, really hard out here right now. So continue with your networking, continue with your craft. Don't get discouraged. Continue with your studying. You're going to get that call, and make sure you're ready when it comes.
Thank you very much. All right, Nada, you're up next.
Yeah, I mean, other than just doing, the things that you typically would do around your resume and all of this stuff, I would definitely say networking is where it's at right now with social media. Getting to know people in the community and interacting with them and talking to them and kind of getting to know them in general. So that way, when something is available, you can either have these discussions and you feel like you already maybe have your foot in the door and those types of things. One thing that actually kind of got me my first opportunity, I don't know if this is something else that would work for everyone else, but I actually paid someone that was an expert to write my resume for me. It did cost a couple of $100, so you have to actually have that money to do this. But I actually paid someone to write my resume, and after that happened, I had, for the first time ever, people reach back out to me because I didn't know how to write a resume. So that actually was just one small tip I'd throw out there.
So majorly in Nigeria, we call that is packaging. In Nigeria, we call it packaging. You package yourself. So because no matter how good you are, people don't know. It does not just show factually that, oh, this person is a good developer. So you look for a way to package yourself so that opportunities can come. All right, so Courts, you have.
Yeah, to piggyback on the networking, I just want to take it one step further. And something that I've seen help people be really successful from being junior developers and immediately trying to build a network is learning in public. If you can get, the motivation or the courage up to be able to do that, they ask questions on Twitter and write blog posts about the things that they're learning just starting out. And you'd be amazed, when we talk about this networking, you might be asking problems about a certain language or framework, and people who are experts will dive in there and help you out. And as someone who's just breaking into tech, there's so much, and it can be very hard to filter out what you should focus on, what's important and what is not. Lean on the community. This is one of the few communities that I've been involved in that is just so forthcoming with information and willing to share and to help. And so use that, take full advantage of it. That's my advice.
All right, thank you very much. As I said earlier, this is not a technical session. It's more like a conversation where you get to understand that all the amazing developers you are seeing, Kurt is in Apollo GraphQL, Nada is in Amazon, and Jesus is in Amplitude, Chair is in Apple. So these amazing developers, they have faced tons of problems also as a developer, as someone building up their career also. So it's not easy anywhere actually, and nobody has it on the platter like that. Even people who started coding at the age of 3 had to forgo quite a lot of things to actually become a developer at the end. So it's not really that easy. And thank you very much for coming online. Thank you very much. All right, so
thank you for hosting.
Let's end the session now.
Thanks
Come
so
on
much,
Twitter.
everybody.
I would come on Twitter and follow these developers on Twitter and ask your questions on Twitter. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.